name is Menasche. I'm a senior attorney with Disability Rights California. I've been working there since 2002. It's amazing how time has flown. And our area is obviously disability, and we advocate and litigate for people with disabilities. We've been, since the time I was first started at DRC, I was involved in housing and homelessness, but the nature of the clients or the conditions of the clients and their situations changed quite a bit from 2002, when we were fighting to preserve people's right to stay in residential hotels and they were being converted. We had a case involving the Maryland Hotel in downtown San Diego that they converted to a tourist hotel and threw out the 212 residents into the streets. I'm sure some of them are still homeless, probably many of them. And since that time, when my client base has become more and more homeless. So it's very distressing what's happened. So I've become kind of specialized in understanding the criminalization of homelessness and opposing that in litigation and in grassroots organizing, which I'm also involved in. We have a community organization called San Diego Housing Emergency Alliance that has been doing a lot of work, having protests and things like that when we were able to go out there easily. It's a little more difficult right now for some of us, though I'm glad to see some people are still doing it. But we were having regular rallies and things of that nature around our lawsuit, which I'll talk to you about. In order to criminalize homelessness, you need to blame the people who are homeless. That's like the basic thing. You can't criminalize people unless people have the idea in their mind that there's something wrong with them. They did something bad, and that's why they're in their plight. They made bad decisions, they're bad people, whatever it is, but it's their fault that they're in that situation. And if they didn't want to be in this situation, then they wouldn't be. So it's very important to bust the myths about why people are homeless. Homelessness has become a mass phenomenon, and since I've been around for a while in this country, I know that it wasn't always the case. It really didn't happen until the 1980s as a mass phenomenon. It was basically pretty much unheard of. You'd see a drunk in the Bowery in New York, maybe one or two people, but you did not see mass homelessness. You didn't see homeless families. You didn't see that phenomenon at all. We now have at least 2.5 to 3.5 million people sleeping in shelters in the United States, or vehicles, or in public places not meant for human habitation. Another 7.2 million have lost homes, and doubling up due to economic necessity. And that hides the actual homelessness, because people end up sleeping on the couch in a friend's house or family member's house in conditions that may be overcrowded. And would be on the streets if it wasn't for the generosity of their friend or family member. Almost 2.5 children were homeless in 2013, and that's an old statistic, so I'm sure it's much worse right now. Racial and ethnic minorities are disproportionately affected. And people with disabilities are disproportionately affected too. 39% of homeless people in San Diego report mental health disabilities, and 40% report physical disabilities. There may be some overlap between the two, but it's probably a majority or a large majority have disabilities. And we should be clear that the poverty creates disability. And so even if a person comes onto the streets without any disabilities whatsoever, they will probably end up with one because of the conditions that they're living in, whether it's mental health or physical disabilities. Their physical health will not be able to be maintained, or their mental health. So we can't say that it's a two-way street, the phenomenon. 15% of homeless adults, and this is overwhelmingly females, are survivors of domestic violence. And according to a Minnesota study, 32% of homeless women became homeless due to domestic violence. There's a lot of myths out there. The city loves to promote these myths in order to justify treating people as criminals because they're poor and because they don't have housing, they can't afford housing. One of the myths is the lifestyle choice that people do it because it's fun. They like to hang out at the beach because it's fun. Um, they have a term that they used, which I never heard of until the city raised it, and that was van lifers. The idea that they're spoiled young people who just choose to live in their vans just for fun. And sometimes, because there's such a stigma around homelessness, there is, you don't necessarily get the truth when you ask people straight out about why they're living in their van, for example, because people want to be able to say they're making a free choice and things like that. So if you ask some young person why they're living in a van, they'll say, oh, I really like it. It's great, you know. But then you say, well, what was going on before? Were you able to pay rent? Well, it was really hard. I had to work 3 jobs, and then I couldn't go anywhere, and I wasn't eating, and you know, so when you get into the specifics, they couldn't afford the rent. So why would anybody choose to live in a van if you had a better choice? That's the reality. So people don't like to admit that they don't really have real choices. So they put a good spin on it. So the city's able to take that good spin that people put on stuff and make it sound like, oh, see, free choice. But the reality is that people can't afford housing in the city, and that's the reality. Then there's a myth about mental illness. It's a myth that people who should be hospitalized were discharged out of institutions, and because they were too impaired to take care of themselves, then homelessness rose because of that. And there's a lot of push in Sacramento um, to increase forced treatment, as that's going to help. If you force people to take medications that often make them unable to even think clearly. I mean, they're very powerful medications that do not make you function necessarily better at all. But that's going to somehow allow them to make enough money to afford the rent. And that's, of course, we don't have high recovery rates with the type of mental health treatment that's used in this country. And that's not what causes the homelessness, it's the poverty. And we can talk about the poverty. And then the idea that it's mostly drug addicts. Drug addiction is actually a small minority, though it is also true that the conditions on the streets encourage addiction. When people are in hard conditions, they do tend to use drugs and alcohol. So it's really can be a cause. The homelessness can actually be a cause of that, not just an effect. And in any case, you're still talking about a minority of the people. The real causes are, number one, poverty. It's a question of simple arithmetic, and I don't understand what the Mayor Faulkner did for his 2nd grade class, but he must have missed that. There's a gap between low wages or frozen public benefits and rising rents. And again, mass homelessness is a new phenomenon, and it rose in the 1980s, and it rose decades after the period of deinstitutionalization where people were released from hospitals, mental hospitals. So it's not even in the same time period. When I was in law school, I had a friend with schizophrenia. She was actually my roommate for a period of time. She was able to live outside an institution despite a serious mental illness, and she was able to afford rent in San Francisco. I don't know if anybody's ever been to San Francisco, but it's even more ridiculous, the rents, than San Diego, but that was not always the case. In San Francisco, where I lived for several decades actually after law school, I went to law school there. But during law school, I had a 3-bedroom unit, which I rented with 2 roommates. We each had our own bedroom, and it was a nice flat, good condition. Our total rent was $300. Total rent for the whole place. So my rent was $80 for a room by myself in this flat. Now, so San Francisco, I consider myself an economic refugee from San Francisco. I got out when I realized that I was a tenant and it was getting really scary because the rents were going up to the sky, and if you moved, you would have no options. If you were forced out and for some reason, you would have no options. You had rent control, but you had no rent control once a person left. And so people were being forced out of places they'd lived in for decades, so that these real estate speculators could make a lot of money flipping properties. And so the writing was on the wall and I got out. No, that's how I ended up in San Diego. In San Diego now, though, it's the same process has happened in San Francisco. When I first got here, it was actually pretty affordable. I bought a house immediately. It was really cheap. The first time I bought a house, but it was very cheap. And now I'm looking around me and it's the same process happening in San Diego. It's actually happening all over the country and all over the world. This is a worldwide phenomenon of using real estate housing as a casino chip, essentially, to make quick money. And that has taken housing out of affordability, removed affordability on housing all over the world. And increased homelessness as a worldwide phenomenon. So what I saw in San Francisco was only the beginning. So what's the link between people with disabilities and homelessness? Because there is a disproportionate number of people who are homeless who have disabilities. The link is poverty because of, and I just left my fact sheet here. Oh, God. It fell out. It was in my other room. Anyway, let me tell you, I think I know what it, anyway, there was a study. It's called Priced Out 2020. If you look at TAC I think it's .org. I could probably run in the other room later if I take a 2-second break. But there was a study done, and they've been doing studies every year comparing the amount you get for SSI payments to the average cost of a efficiency or a studio apartment. And I think I'm trying to remember what I just saw this morning because I got the 2020 figures. I think it's something like 149% of the SSI. So the SSI is something like $940 a month, something like that, and the median rental rental is more like $2,000 a month or something. So you basically have to make 149% of SSI to even get the lowest cost apartment, small apartment in San Diego. So the math just doesn't work. No matter what you do, no matter how you try, it doesn't matter. The math does not work. So there's a 10-year wait to get onto Section 8 benefits, which is the rent subsidy. Even people on Section 8 are going to have a hard time surviving on, less than $1,000 a month for SSI. But without the Section 8, there's no way you could afford rent in San Diego, no matter what you do. So if you have a disability and you're unable to work, you're out of luck. A lot of people who are seniors who are on Social Security are also out of luck because Social Security doesn't pay enough to live either. So the connection again is the poverty and also the conditions of being poor and the conditions of being homeless also creates disability. So that's the interconnection. So one of the slogans of our community organization is "No housing, no choice." That it's not a choice. It's not a lark. It's not because people like the view at the beach. It's not a bunch of spoiled, lazy people who just turn down the wonderful services that are available to them that could solve that problem in an instant, which is what you hear at city council meetings and what you hear from the mayor, and it's all not true. We have lost in this city thousands of affordable units just in the last couple of decades through hotel and condo conversions, as I explained in the case of the Maryland Hotel, but there were many, many others. And then real estate speculation, turning housing into a casino. San Diego County has a shortage of 136,631 affordable rental homes. And yet we're doing construction. If you go downtown, and I haven't been downtown a lot lately, to tell you the truth, but when I was in March, there's major construction going on all over the place. But what are they producing? Are they producing housing that people can live in? No. They're producing $1 million condos, luxury apartments, and Airbnbs. That's what they're producing. So it's like the Great Depression when there was plenty of food and the food was rotting in the field, but no one could afford to eat. It's a problem of the market. There's at least twice as many homeless people in the city as shelter beds. And many of those shelters are inaccessible to people with disabilities. In other words, they're either because of their physical conditions, their vulnerability to infection, their sensitivity to odors, their mental health conditions where they can't have a hard time with the complete lack of privacy, would aggravate their anxiety, that many of those are inaccessible, and they don't solve anything because they're a temporary merry-go-round. I've had multiple clients who've been to one shelter and then another shelter and then another shelter and then back on the street and then another shelter and back on the street, because shelters do not solve the problem. The problem is not fixing the person. The problem is creating housing that is affordable, having sustainable incomes, for living wages and sustainable incomes if you can't work. And that's the problem. One of the most shocking statistics that I just read a few months ago was a San Diego Housing Commission study which reported that 50% of San Diegans cannot afford market rate housing. They can't afford it. It says 50%. So if they're in housing, they're in just by the skin of their teeth. That could end at any point. So unless something dramatic is done in San Diego and in the country, but in San Diego, including rent control, we don't have no rent control in the city, and the construction of sufficient affordable units and affordable to the people who need it, including people who are make under 30% of area median income, people on fixed incomes on Social Security or SSI, that without that construction, it'll get only worse. And now with the COVID-19 crisis, with people losing jobs and income, we can expect homelessness to increase. Right now, there's a stay on evictions. There's nobody actually being evicted, and some people have been given forbearance on paying rent or paying mortgage. When that's done, they're not being forgiven it. It's not like let's just hold what they should have done, which is nobody pays anything now and you don't owe it. You don't pay your mortgage, you don't pay rent, you don't have to pay anything until this is over. But that's not what's happening. So they're gonna end up with a big bill. And that big bill they're not gonna be able to afford, assuming they even have a job, because people's jobs wasn't enough to live as it was. But they're going to end up with mass eviction. So we are likely to see the crisis get a lot worse in the present circumstances. Now, the attitude toward poor people was a little bit different as a result of the work of the civil rights movement, figures like Martin Luther King. In 1964, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was not a great president, by the way, he was a horrible president in many ways. However, he had a civil rights movement breathing down his throat. He introduced a war on poverty rather than the war on the poor that's going on right now. And though that war on poverty was very inadequate, and it was very much overshadowed by his favorite war, which was the one in Vietnam, it did in fact ease the plight of many poor people. In 1968, Martin Luther King initiated a poor people's campaign with a set of demands to alleviate poverty regardless of race. Those efforts were stalled at first, and then they were reversed. When President Bill Clinton issued welfare reform, there was no longer a war on poverty. Instead, it turned into a war on the poor. In 2020, in the city of San Diego, we have an active war and a one-sided war against people who are poor, specifically a war against people experiencing homelessness, which is the most devastating form of poverty, which was, as I said before, virtually unknown in prior decades until the 1980s. It was unknown. When people were talking about poverty in the 1960s, it was real. People were hungry. People had malnutrition. People lived in slum apartments that had rats and roaches and leaks and ceilings that were caving in, and not healthy environments. But they were not on the street. They were not on the street. So we were fighting poverty, which was a horrible thing. And I remember in college, looking, trying to do some community work and touring low-income Black communities in my city. And those conditions were not good. They were really bad, but nothing like today. So I hear these war stories every day from law-abiding San Diego residents who we're representing in a class action lawsuit against the city. And we're representing people who shelter in their vehicles, their RVs, their vans, or their other vehicles. The name of the case is Bloom versus City of San Diego. We represent a class of approximately 800 people and probably double that in the city, who reside in the city. This constant harassment by police, a cat and mouse kind of game where they have to avoid tickets. They have to move and hide out. People are, cops shake and bang their vehicles at the middle of the night, and terrifying, particularly the women who are survivors of post-traumatic stress disorder. They terrorize people. The city has been issuing thousands of dollars of tickets, and that people can't afford to pay. And but they pay them, and when they do pay, try to pay them, and they try to pay them a lot. So I think they've ended up paying about half of the money that's owed. It's a tax on the poor, and in order to pay them, they have to sacrifice food and medicine. Because the consequences of not paying the tickets are very severe. If you have 5 or more unpaid tickets under state law, the city doesn't have to, but can and does impound vehicles because of the unpaid tickets. And that can throw people out into the streets with no place to go. So then we also have the vehicle habitation ordinance, and that's a history of that one's really interesting. That makes it a crime to what they call habitate in your vehicle, but that's been a problem trying to define what that means, because anytime you're in the vehicle, anybody's in a vehicle, you're habitating, you're living, right? And how many people have water, food, a pillow, a barbecue, any of that kind of stuff in a vehicle? A lot of people. So everyone lives in a vehicle, but people who lack housing are the ones that are being penalized by these ordinances. The vehicle habitation ordinance is real old, the first one, and we filed God, how long has it been? A couple of years ago already? We filed a motion for a preliminary injunction to ask the court to order that it not be enforced, because we said it was unconstitutional. It was unconstitutionally vague and being discriminatorily enforced against poor people who appear to not have housing. And we convinced the judge that we had a good argument, and he issued a preliminary injunction that ordinance not be enforced. So we celebrated. Within a few months, the city repealed that ordinance, and within 6 weeks after that, they passed a new one. And the new one was worse than the old one. The new one, instead of the original ordinance, was a infraction. It was only could be charged as an infraction, which means there's no jail time or anything like that, no arrests. Still was, you had to pay a fine, and fines can add up, and fines could end up with your vehicle being impounded, but no arrests. Now it's a misdemeanor. It can be charged as a infraction or a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor in San Diego can result in up to 6 months in jail or $1,000 fine. So there's very serious consequences for vehicle habitation. It also is very draconian in the way it defines vehicle habitation. It basically says that at nighttime, I think 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. you can't be anywhere in the city except in a safe lot, quote unquote. Certain lots that have been set aside in certain areas of the city that where you can go. Of course, they don't pay for your gas to get there and back to where you need to go during the day. But in any case, the safe lots, they say that would be legal, but you have to basically go kind of into a camp. That's what it is. Or you can get arrested. So they're not so attractive that people want to go without the threat of getting arrested, but with threat of getting arrested, some more people have gone there, and I can talk about that if or more information about those places. So in the nighttime, you can't be anywhere else but the safe lots. You can't be parked anywhere on city streets, not in city parking lots, anything like that. Private property, of course, does not count, though police do tend to make a mistake and harass you and threaten you anyway. But if you're on private property with the permission of the owner, it's not a problem. But if you don't have that, you can't be anywhere in the city except these camps. But in the daytime, you are prohibited from most areas of the city, the large majority of areas. The restriction is you can't be within 500 feet of any residence or school, K through 12 school. 500 feet is a city block, a big, those large city blocks, which means that they couldn't visit me in my office when I used to be there because we have there's one residential hotel nearby that's still left. There's hardly any, but there's one. You can't go to a lot of shopping centers because they're right near housing. You can't go to doctor's offices. You certainly can't visit a friend or family member. You're restricted. You can't be at certain public parks like Ocean Beach Park because that's right near, there's some condos like across the street. So you can't be there. So you're being prohibited from most areas of the city. And I called it poverty apartheid. That's because you are forbidden from all these areas of the city any time of the day or night. So they basically took a really bad ordinance which was being abused, and they made it more draconian and worse, spelling out the prohibitions in a way that is a violation of your right to travel, violation of the right to association. I mean, it's just turning people into a prisoner class, basically, people who have done nothing but be poor and do what they need to do to shelter themselves. So my clients are an interesting group. It shows their background show that the circumstances could happen to anybody. We have a lawyer, we have a car salesman, they're retired, but they're older people. Lawyer, car salesman, person who worked as a chiropractor, carpenter, government workers, and many, of course, parents, grandparents, people who, lived their entire time in the city, their entire lives in the city, went to school here, everything. So as an old Phil Oakes song said, there but for fortune go I. And I think we need to keep that in mind. The COVID-19 situation has done a few things to change things a little bit. They're not at the moment doing as much enforcement of the vehicle habitation ordinance. They have threatened a couple of people enough to scare them, the police, but they haven't actually done a lot of enforcement right now. The ticketing has slowed down, but not been eliminated, and I think it's going to increase. It's going to happen again soon. I don't know what with the increase in spread right now. I don't know what's going to happen. Let me tell you about the safe lots. The safe lots. The city has 3 safe lots they've contracted out with Jewish Family Services. One is located in their headquarters at Balboa, which is where they have their offices and everything. The other is on Arrow Drive, and I haven't actually seen that one. And the other one was moved. It was like a block from the Qualcomm Stadium, off a very steep hill. It's pure asphalt, no shade, and not a flat surface either once you got in there. They relocated that temporarily to area within Qualcomm Stadium. They were They did increase the spacing between the vehicles so that people would not be as vulnerable to infection. They did increase the number of porta potties because it was pitifully low number of porta potties. When I saw it a year ago, pitifully low number for the number of people, like 3 porta potties for 150 people, which is not very healthy. There, so the shower situation is still really bad. You still have to, like, if you're lucky, you can get a shower once a week. I think you have to go somewhere to the Balboa location, but I'm not completely sure of that. But I know that it's not easy to get showers. It's going to be hot as hell there pretty soon because it's a very hot area of town. If you're in a metal box and there's no hookups, there's no, like if you have an RV, there's no breeze, there's no hookups, there's no shade in a hot area of town. I mean, that's going to be pretty difficult. If people have service or emotional support dogs, I can't imagine how they're going to walk them on that hot pavement. So it's going to be not the best living conditions. Probably, I would surmise that it's not even up to refugee camp status. I think they have to provide you with, decent, like, shade and livable temperatures and things like that. So they are now able to stay in 2 out of 3 lots for 24 hours a day. The other one, they're not. Originally, it was just nighttime and you had to leave, which was very difficult for people because of the gas money. And RVs in particular are very expensive to drive. And these are people who are dirt poor and they weren't paying for the gas. So, and people would want to go to the beach. I mean, they want to go to the beach. Why would they want to go to the beach? Well, hey, they've got flush toilets, showers, and breeze and cooler air, more temperate climate. Who wouldn't want to do that? Of course they do that. They're going to stay in the hottest part of the city with no amenities, no anything. So they'd want to go back there during the day. And some people are, one of our clients goes to the VA for medical treatment, and that's closer by. They have their communities, people that they know, their doctors in certain areas, and they have a life like anybody else. And to have to be in like a certain lot in a certain area is really a violation of people's rights. Our lawsuit, the one I'm talking about now, the Bloom case, we're challenging the two ordinances. One is an ordinance that prevents RVs from parking anywhere at night except the safe lots. And there's only one safe lot that accepts RVs, that one on Qualcomm Stadium. That's now in Qualcomm Stadium. So they have no place, other place to park RVs at night between 2 and 6 a.m. And they get these really expensive tickets, $112.50 a shot, doubled in 21 days, a fortune of tickets. And then the vehicle habitation ordinance, which I already discussed. Then the other situation that's happening right now is because of the COVID crisis, the government, through state, I think it's state money and federal money, I don't know if it's federal money now, but it's definitely state money, arranged for all these empty hotel rooms to be available for homeless people who met certain criteria. And the criteria that has been followed by which is on paper in the state and local, county, and city, is that they're supposed to be available to people who test positive, who have COVID, and also for people who are more vulnerable to complications and death from COVID-19 because they have certain medical conditions. People who are more vulnerable to those infections, and they're supposed to also be getting access to hotel rooms. The hotel rooms, except for people who already are testing positive, the hotel rooms for people who are more vulnerable are staying empty while they're putting all these people, over 1,000 people, into the convention center. They've taken people they've cleared out encampments, which they're not supposed to do under the CDC guidelines. They cleared out encampments. They've transferred people from the other shelters, and they put them all into the convention center. which is a kind of a win for the city in terms of their own finances, because the city is responsible for, they get the benefit of the convention center. They also have to pay the debts, and they're not doing any business right now. So hey, what a deal. So they threw all the people into the convention center, even though congregate housing is highly dangerous for the spread of COVID-19. And we've seen that with nursing homes and places like that. So we're representing a class of people, a group of people who are vulnerable, particularly vulnerable to complications and deaths from COVID-19 because they have certain medical conditions, and we're demanding that they release those hotel rooms and take them out of what could very well become a death trap at the convention center. So that's the other case that we're involved in. So on our Bloom case involving resident, those who reside or those who seek shelter in their vehicles. We have a couple of good cases that help us, good court decisions that help us. One is the Martin v. City of Boys decision that says that the act of sheltering yourself when there's no adequate alternatives is a cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment. And the second case is called Desert Train versus City of Los Angeles, sorry. And that says that basically you can't have these vague ordinances that describe, that fail to draw clear lines between illegal and illegal conduct like the vehicle habitation ordinances do. So we have those cases. And then there's also the issue of excessive fines. There's also a constitutional issue where excessive fines that are disproportionate to the gravity of the offense would be considered unconstitutional. So we think that the gravity of the offense of living and doing what you need to shelter yourself, those fines are excessive, and we're challenging those on that basis as well. Our case also claims disability discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act because of the failure to provide reasonable accommodations or modifications on their policies for people with disabilities. And people with disabilities are going to suffer the most. They have the least options for getting out of their situation because they cannot, a lot of them cannot get full-time gainful employment. And because they have physical and or mental health conditions, are going to be worsened by the constant police harassment, the impounding of their vehicles and throwing them out into the streets. So they're going to be more vulnerable to harm because of that. So we have an ADA claim as well. So I just end my comments on what we need, which is a new anti-poverty movement. And I think I'm very inspired and hopeful about the Black Lives Matter organizing that's been going on now, which is a step in that direction, since Black people do disproportionately suffer from poverty and homelessness because of the institutionalized racism in our society. Martin Luther King wanted to take it a step further in addition to challenge poverty itself. He wanted to bring poor people to Washington, that was to demand change. And I have a quote from him. We ought to come in mule carts and old trucks, any kind of transportation people can get their hands on. People ought to come to Washington, sit down if necessary in the middle of the street and say, we are here, we are poor, we don't have any money, you have made us this way, and we've come to stay until you do something about it. Questions?